Lake George is a 150 square kilometre ephemeral lake just north of Canberra. Lake George is an internally drained system as it has no outlet. However, if the lake gets very, very deep, it eventually flows out where the federal highway first comes to the lake and flows into the Yass River. Lake George has murky fresh water. It tastes very fresh. I can't taste the salt. It's pretty awful to put it in your mouth, but I've tried it. Lake George is now about 4 metres deep at the deepest, but it used to be about 30 metres deep, and that's a warning for the future. So I've investigated the geomorphological evidence of the lake being much deeper than it is today. And the evidence consists mainly of ancient beach profiles, particularly beach ridges, and that's what you're looking at right now, thanks Google Earth. On the eastern shoreline of the lake, the beach ridges are really apparent. They're quite high. Unfortunately, they don't show up in aerial photographs, but most of them have the rushes on top of them. The lake also dries up during droughts, disappears entirely, and when I first saw the lake, there was no water, maybe just a little bit on the very far side. The lake is also quite moody, so when very cold air comes over, the lake becomes misty, and when the wind blows, the lake becomes quite rough, and in fact, people have died when their boats have capsized in the lake. The primary wildlife is the grey kangaroo, and normally they're out there grazing across the dry lake bed, even in the cold sleet. But at the moment they're compressed around the edges. Waterbirds are also very common, such as black swans and white-faced herons and all sorts of ducks. Occasionally there's a turtle, and I'm very interested in the smaller animals that are at the base of the food chain, such as yabbies, and I found some yabby remains. I don't think yabbies are common. I think they're quite rare. And on one occasion, I found a driftline that was entirely composed of the shells of water boatmen. And on dark, I've seen vast columns of insects above the lake in breeding formations. There's not much in the way of aquatic plant life around the lake either. I found mudwort, which is this tiny little thing with flowers. And during the times when the lake is bare, it generally has a succulent growing all over it. It's heavily grazed by sheep and kangaroos, so maybe the succulent's there by default. The succulent is Dysphaenia pumilio. Around the lake, the climate's a little bit milder and a little bit wetter than in other places that are so far inland, and we get ribbon gums. During exceptionally dry periods, sand is blown out of the base of the lake, and particularly on the eastern side, forms deep deposits that are rather like sand dunes. In fact, this is where Canberra gets most of its sand from. I have only seen the sand as a result of Mr. Wombat digging holes. Thanks for listening.